radicals who was housing in Libya at the time. He had a couple of training camps there. And this, if he shut them down, that would help Arafat and those who were engaged in making peace with Israel.
A few days later, Libya expelled the Abu Nidal group. In February 2000, the United States relaxed its sanctions. Gaddafi could now hope to cast off his pariah status and see US companies return. That would guarantee investment and underwrite the stability of his regime. Or so he thought. Dealing with a democracy can have some drawbacks for a dictator. When George W. Bush succeeded Bill Clinton, the American political landscape changed completely. The new president admired Ronald Reagan and disliked Gaddafi. To him, Libya was a terrorist state, along with Iraq and North Korea. His administration focused less on diplomacy than Clinton's had done.
Entering the White House, Libya was hardly on the radar screen for the Bush administration. Clearly, Libya was still under severe sanctions. From time to time, someone would come and say that there had been efforts to move relations forward. I was vaguely aware that in the Clinton administration there had been some discussions. Those were, it seemed to us, had not gone very far.
America discovered, in the most brutal way, a new public enemy number one. Al-Qaeda and its leader, Osama bin Laden, were Gaddafi's mortal enemies. He'd been hunting them for years.
On est donc clairement dans un moment de tension internationale fort. Gaddafi a condamné les attentats du 11 septembre. Il me dit à ce moment-là qu'il avait mis en garde contre Al-Qaïda. Et nous, à l'Occident, procès d'avoir soutenu Ben Laden dans d'autres circonstances et sur d'autres théâtres d'opération.
It must have been a very comfortable feeling to be able to say, for example, that Libya had issued through Interpol a warrant for the arrest of bin Laden 2 years before the Americans did.
Al-Qaeda had tried to kill him on several occasions before 9/11. The Libyans were already cooperating with us on counter-terrorism, and indeed that had begun many years before. And the line the Libyans had taken was that we in the West were steadily underestimating the threat posed by Al-Qaeda. They warned us many times that we were not taking this threat seriously enough.
Gaddafi had sounded the alarm, but the White House now had every country linked to terrorism in its sights. So the colonel did whatever he could to efface his previous notoriety. He sent his intelligence chiefs to London to offer to help the West. It was yesterday's terrorists versus the terrorists of today.
When the Libyans actually came and their intelligence people were prepared to cooperate in the fight against terrorism, sure, it was strange, but I was aware that the event of September the 11th was indeed producing different reactions and different alliances.
At this point, there was no doubt, in the Leninist phrase, you know, you're either with us or you're against us. And that was true for the whole international community.
It was in those very first days after 9/11, the first weeks after 9/11, of course you were looking to see who was on the side of al-Qaeda and who was not. And the fact that Libya denounced al-Qaeda was an important signal.
The Libyans were experts on international terrorism. In a central London hotel, they gave Western intelligence services thousands of documents on Islamist networks in Europe and around the world.
I think it would be fair to say that Libya was probably our most valuable counter-terrorism partner in that region. The Libyans had been studying al-Qaeda for some years, obviously, and I remember on one occasion I took the members of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee to meet Musa Kusa, and he gave them a briefing about what sort of people al-Qaeda were. And it was one of the most compelling and instructive briefings I had ever heard. I don't think I have seen a bunch of members of Parliament so quiet and attentive on any other occasion. He described how an al-Qaeda suicide bomber would feel if he or she was present in the room with us and was about to blow us up.
Intelligence people, because those links were there and were maintained, were very pleased to have anyone who could give them information on al-Qaeda. And of course, Libya also was a link to other parts of the Maghreb. And obviously, al-Qaeda was very active in other parts of the Maghreb.
Libya became a zealous ally in the war on terror, in turning al-Qaeda suspects brought in by the CIA and ruthlessly repressing its own Islamists.
This attack has been used to the utmost by the regime in Libya. Everyone now in the Arab world, in Libya, is arresting people, imprisoning people, torturing people in the name of fighting terrorism. So Gaddafi has used it. When we know that a lot of, or most of the incidents that happened in Libya in recent years, they have nothing to do with al-Qaeda whatsoever.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Gaddafi would have been well pleased by George Bush's State of the Union address in January 2002. One country was absent from the list of America's enemies.
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons. Our war against terror is only beginning.
But Gaddafi also noted the warning that America would not tolerate the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Since the mid-1990s, in the utmost secrecy and with the help of Pakistani and North Korean scientists, Gaddafi had been spending millions of dollars on a program designed to shield him permanently from his enemies. Gaddafi wanted the holy grail of every despot: nuclear weapons. But in 2003, events conspired against him. America was on the warpath, preparing to attack Iraq and another dictator, Saddam Hussein, citing weapons of mass destruction. That wasn't all. In Washington, Pentagon hardliners were planning action against all the region's dictatorships, including Libya. Alarmed, Gaddafi called Tony Blair.
Well, I remember very, very well the days in 2003, and we were very much at that time caught up with the Iraq War, and we had a lot going on. So I remember it as almost coming out of the blue. The Brits say that they have been approached by Colonel Gaddafi, who wants to discuss giving up his weapons of mass destruction. Now, if you can imagine the surprise that this was to us, we said, well, of course, you have to explore that, but what does that mean?
During the call I had with Colonel Gaddafi, the important thing was to get a sense of the sincerity of what he was doing. And so the important thing was to understand why Libya wanted to do this. Was this because, you know, there we were taking action in Afghanistan, we were taking action on Iraq, and therefore were they going then to be worried?
Would the Libyans have felt worried by the possibility that the Americans might look at them and consider them as a military target? I'd assume yes. They had been bombed, after all, by the Americans before.